People are coming from all over Georgia to see you. Midtown, beautiful. And I'm so thrilled to see everybody. I really am. I'm so grateful you all are here. Um, it means the world. We have a really special treat tonight. And I hope you don't mind. I'm going to read a bit because I was told that I always miss things when I don't read. And then people are like, oh, you have to read. So we planned this. I don't know how much everybody knows about Atlanta Israel Coalition. Well, I'm Cheryl Dorchinsky and I run it, and we're an all-volunteer grassroots organization. So Eric was kind enough to call me and suggest doing this. And here we are today. We definitely couldn't have done it without him. And our wonderful host will talk more about that. But that's just to show you that if there's anything you want to see in the community, please never hesitate. You know, we do this out of love. Everybody is working for the same reason, to spread education, Jewish joy, awareness, and to unite. So coming here tonight, I know you all could be doing so many other things, but I'm grateful you're here. And we're very lucky to have Yirmiyahu here. He came in, from Israel, and I don't know when we'll get to have him again, but I'm grateful he is here. Basically, like I said, we do this out of love. We don't have fancy retreats. Everybody who volunteers is in it for the right reason. Every penny you give goes to the cause. So I want to thank those who had donated towards security, towards the program tonight. We have to get security for every program. That's just a reality. And we want to be able to make it free for you. And keep the cost down, because to us, it's more important to have you here than for people to worry about being able to pay to come in. So if you did donate tonight, I'd love to thank you with a kosher duck. We are spreading Jewish joy. And here's the really amazing thing. This just happened. And it brings it all circular, I think. Somebody found one in Bangkok at a Chabad. They were going to donate money to the Chabad, and somebody hid it right underneath the donation area. So they were going to do a mitzvah, and somebody else did a mitzvah at the same time. And here we are at a Chabad in Georgia talking about that mitzvah. How incredible is that? They submitted it, and we have pictures. It's amazing. So without any hesitation, I am going to have our incredible host say a few words and make the introductions. Yes. To end up, thank you all again for being here. And I'll be around after so you could collect your ducks. Thank you. Thank you.
Bruchim habayim, salamu alaikum, shalom aleichem, welcome. And is it Is that Guyanese Creole?
That works, yeah.
I'm Jonathan Zufi. I'm with Chabad Bucket, and I work very closely with Rabbi Yisrael New. Unfortunately, he's not able to be here this evening. He is at a wedding in Florida, but he sends his warmest regards. Just briefly, for those of you who are not familiar, this is Chabad Bucket. We've been here at this location for about a year and a half. And our goal is to create spaces for meaningful Jewish learning, thoughtful dialogue, and genuine community. We're honoured to be able to participate in an evening like this, and we'd love to see you all again at future programs, classes, and events. Before we start, I want to acknowledge that tonight's program is made possible by the Atlanta Israel Coalition, and Cheryl, and specifically Arik Rosenberg, in loving memory of his mother. Arik put tremendous thought, energy, and care into bringing this evening together, and that itself is a very meaningful way to honour her memory. In Jewish tradition, one of the deepest forms of remembrance is creating something positive that brings people together with intention. The life of Lily Rosenberg, Lily Butt Regina, was defined by courage, humility, and unwavering devotion to others. Lily was raised in a very modest home, the eldest of 10 children, and from an early age, she carried responsibility far beyond her years, helping support her parents and siblings, and her family is a story has a story of survival. Her mother escaped Libya, her father escaped Morocco, and that legacy of resilience lived with Lily every day. She served during the Yom Kippur War and later faced another kind of battlefield, making the painful decision to leave her homeland and family to protect her children by immigrating to the United States, and did it without being able to speak English. She took any role necessary to support her family, dealing blackjack in the early casino days of Atlantic City, working odd jobs in Brooklyn, and later waitressing at a kosher retirement home alongside her husband. She tried opening a restaurant and even did shifts as a cashier at Walmart. There were times of real hardship, including periods when she and her husband and their child were living on couches, but she never lost her dignity, her work ethic, or her faith. May her memory be a blessing, and may we honour her by carrying forward the love, resilience, and integrity she lived every day. Before I introduce our speaker, just a quick word about this week's Torah portion. It's Parashat Mishpatim. Mishpatim doesn't just focus on miracles and lofty theology. Instead, it focuses on justice, responsibility, and how people actually show up for one another in the real world. Mishpatim teaches that values aren't just ideas. They're expressed in how we listen, how we speak, and how we engage with people who may see the world often differently than we do. And that idea connects very naturally to tonight's conversation. Our speaker, Yirmiyahu, is committed to honest, open dialogue, for asking hard questions with integrity, and for trying to bridge gaps rather than deepening them. It's creating space for respectful conversation, especially around complex and emotional topics, is very much in the spirit of Mishpatim. Justice in Judaism is not abstract. It lives in the courage to engage thoughtfully and humanely. And so with that, I'd like to get started and introduce Yirmiyahu Danzig. He's a digital educator and content creator specialising in Jewish diversity, history, and identity. After receiving his BA in Homeland Security and Public Diplomacy from IDC Herzliya and studying at Machon Meir Yeshiva, he served as a squad commander in Magav, that's the Israeli Border Police, in a unit responsible for counterterrorism operations and peacekeeping in the Old City of Jerusalem and the Temple Mount. He's a dedicated educator activist. He regularly speaks at joint Israeli-Palestinian events with the purpose of navigating competing narratives and aspirations. He lectures Israeli and diaspora audiences on Jewish identity, diversity, and anti-Semitism. And he also co-founded Shachar, a community for Caribbean, African American, and West African Israeli Jews. Incredible, incredible. He's been published in the Forward, the Times of Israel. He's on TikTok under the handle That Semite, and he speaks Hebrew, English, Arabic, Yiddish, and Guyanese Creole. Please welcome Yirmiyahu.
Thank you. Wow, what an introduction. Oh, I need to put a speaker on? Yeah, I can. Yeah, I figured it out. Thank you for that introduction, and thank you, Cheryl, for putting this together, and Eric for bringing me out here. I mean, it's such an honor to be here with you tonight. And so, yeah, let's just give everybody a round of applause.
We just like the kippah.
And yeah, it depends on the season you see me, you know. But you know, I really didn't take for granted that this was going to be happening tonight for a number of different reasons. But first and foremost, and what we didn't really speak about when we were planning this, is whether or not the skies were going to get shut down. You know, in Israel, every single day, it's like, is it happening tonight? Is it happening tomorrow? When is this eruption of war going to shut everything down, and we're going to go back to, God forbid, a situation like during the 12-day war between Israel and Iran? And, you know, with the escalation and the regime really feeling, you know, its mortality, what that could mean for Israeli society, what that could mean for the whole region, and what that could mean for the United States. And yet it was extremely important for me to do anything possible to come here to speak to you tonight. And I would say that's true about where I'm going to be speaking in Philly tomorrow. But I think it's also in particularly important here in Atlanta, because there are a few places that I see in the United States that are core places of influence on the United States culture as a whole. And what happens in America influences what happens all over the world. And as we're seeing right now in the geopolitics, what's happening specifically in Israel and in the Holy Land. But when I was saying that to somebody earlier this week, somebody was telling me, like, why is it important for you to come out here? Why don't you just keep working over there in the land? And I told them that what's happening in America has an influence on what happens all over the world. And so, of course, I have to be here. I have to be present. I have to be engaging people on this side of the water. But as my friend who I was speaking to reminded me, yeah, but really, what happens there, what happens in that land, what happens in Israel, that's what has influence on the whole world. And of course, we know that that's true. We know in a very deep, beautiful, but also very uncomfortable way how true that is. Because any small thing that happens in that tiny piece of land has massive ripple effects all over the entire planet. You mentioned earlier in the introduction that I was a squad commander in the border police, specifically in the old city of Jerusalem. And in that tiny little kilometer, which is the old city, any tiny movement of a rock and the entire world is on its feet. And that's like a microcosm of something that we see happening all over the world when it comes to Israel and the Jewish people. It expresses itself in very ugly ways, double standards that the Jewish people are subjected to that other people are not, double standards that the state of Israel's policies are subjected to, that the Israeli military and police are subjected to, that other militaries and police are not. But it's also an incredible source of power and inspiration, because we know that with that great power of influence has the ability, the responsibility to actually use it for good. And, we're uniquely positioned right now to change the way that we speak about our identity as Jewish people or as people related and connected to the state of Israel. Instead of speaking about Israel in a defensive posture of just defending a status quo, we have to stop defending. We have to start being proactive in telling our story, in challenging the parts of our story that maybe we're not so confident about. Right? Asking difficult questions about our own identity, about our own history, about how we got to this point today in the history of the state of Israel and of the Jewish people, so that we can rectify what needs to be rectified. Because certainly, if the reality is as it is, and we can get into what that reality is, then obviously something is broken. Right? We are not perfect. The state of the world is far from perfect. And that means that we have a lot to do. We have a lot of work to do. And that work can be done, obviously, in the land of Israel. And it's being done by many people. But it can also be done right here in your communities. Engaging people with different identities, engaging people with different cultures, with different perspectives. That's the opportunity to build a bridge that could hopefully create a meaningful relationship. And in relationships with people with different identities and different experiences, that is when you create something new. And in creating something new, that could be the revolution. That could be where all of a sudden the state of Israel, the Jewish people, instead of being a source of scorn, a source of fear, a source of hatred, as we're seeing overwhelm us basically everywhere right now, all of a sudden something cool, something that's inspiring, something that's driving humanity to the next stage. So a short version of how I got to seeing the world the way that I do, that I kind of just outlined for you, really comes from my childhood. I grew up in a household that to me was very normal, and that was an Israeli father who on his patrilineal side can count back his generation 10 generations in the land of Israel. I can go and see the graves of my grandparents 5, 6, 7 generations back on the Mountain of Olives. And on the other side, my mother's side, a Jewish woman from the Caribbean. And so in our house, we listen to Zohar Gov, if people know what that is. It's Mizrahi Israeli music. And Bob Marley and Buju Banton, if you know what that is, right? And that was normal. We had falafel, we had plantain, we listened to Hebrew music, and we listened to Arabic music, and we listened to reggae music. That was the cultural milieu that I grew up in. And very quickly, I realized that was not the norm, that not a lot of people have that fusion of identities. But it forced me from a very young age to constantly be engaging with people that really didn't understand my identity and didn't understand the story of the Jewish people, and certainly not the story of the state of Israel. And I had to learn different languages, sometimes literal languages, like what you heard before, but usually it's worldviews. It's the ability to communicate with people in the way that they see the world, not in the way that I see the world. Because if you're not speaking to somebody in their language through their cultural experience, then you're speaking past them. You're not really speaking to them. And so when I left everything that I was doing as a student activist, I'm skipping over that chapter, and I started getting involved in grassroots activism in Israeli society, I very quickly realized that even within the state of Israel, the vast majority of Jews and Arabs have never meaningfully communicated with each other. Even the ones that are going to the same universities together, even the ones that are going to the army together, when they have conversations, they're usually speaking past each other, and and sometimes just ignoring each other. And that often the case, just ignoring each other. And I'll give you an example of something that really just illuminated this entire paradox, this entire problem to me. On Jerusalem Day, which is a day of incredible ecstasy, passion for the Jewish people, for so many Israeli Jews. It's like this moment in which we're celebrating not just the reestablishment of Jewish self-determination, but the return to Jerusalem, to our eternal capital, reunification of Jerusalem. This step towards the redemption of the Jewish people in the most visceral terms. That's what Jerusalem Day means to so many Jewish Israelis. For Palestinians and for Arab citizens of Israel, it's almost the polar opposite of that. It's seen as the complete collapse of any aspiration for Arab, Palestinian, Muslim sovereignty and self-determination in Jerusalem. Why that's important, we can get into that later. And so that day is experienced as a place of deep embarrassment, shame, and anger. And so, as I've grown accustomed to do, whenever I see that there's a group of people, the people are saying, don't talk to those people, I'm like, okay, I'm going to talk to those people. And so I was walking on like the march. There's a huge march that happens on Jerusalem Day where there's a lot of young yeshiva kids, and they're going from the Yafo Street, going through the old city, through the Muslim quarter, intentionally, to go to the Kotel and to celebrate Jerusalem Day. And I watched that past this, parade of marchers, there was a gate and there was a fence. And then past the gate and the fence, there was a group of young Palestinian men between age 16 to 26. And I pushed past the gate with my kippah, looking very visibly Jewish, and I started engaging with them in Arabic. First thing is they were completely floored. They didn't even know that this was possible. They were looking for the cops to do something. They're like, is this legal? Can he come here? And the cops are like, well, we put the fences up, but law says we can't separate people according to ethnicity, right? So I pushed past the fence, and the cops are just like looking at me, like, give me a look, like, don't start any problems. So I started engaging them and asking them, like, what does this day mean to you? And very quickly, it escalated to the point where it often does in these conversations, which is that you are not the people. You are not the real children of Israel. The real children of Israel, I don't know where they are, but there's no way that what you're doing here is what the Torah, what the Quran was prophesizing what should happen. And he said to me to that, like, as if it's a matter of fact, not if it was a point of like argument, like that he knew I was going to rebut him. He thought I would just acknowledge that. And so I started obviously pushing back on that notion. Like, no, we are the children of Israel. This is what we prayed for generation after generation and generation. This is what the people that had never left were struggling, like my family, right? They're struggling to manifest. And here we are. And you have to just deal with that. This is a fact. This is a fact whether you want to look at it historically, whether you look at it prophetically. This is what is happening right now. You need to reconcile yourself with that reality. Never in that entire group, and it was like 15, 16 Palestinian men, had they ever heard a Jew articulate their identity, but in a way that wasn't antagonistic to them. Because I also said, you are also of this land. You are also deeply connected to Jerusalem. And my return to Jerusalem as a sovereign Jew doesn't have to be, if you don't want it to be, it doesn't have to mean your defeat. It doesn't have to be your shame. And in that moment, there was a quiet. And there's a lot of noise. So it was strange to hear quiet in that context. And one of the younger guys pushed the head of the pack aside And he said to me, wait, are you saying that you people are the followers of Musa, alayhi salam, of the prophet Moses? And I was like, well, yeah, that's kind of the whole thing, right? And I could see like the light bulb going off in his mind. Because if that's true, if you really are this people, then we have a lot that we should be talking about, right? We should actually have a lot of things in common. And what I found throughout all of this work, going off in often cases, day after day, to different villages, to different communities, and communicating with people, whether it's Arab citizens of Israel, Palestinians in Judea and Samaria, Afro-Bedouins in Rahat, Haredi Jews in Bnei Brak, that there's so much that we have in common that it really is entirely possible for us to figure out a way to work this out. But we have to be very clear-minded about the barriers that exist, about the deep bigotries and the lies that we're telling ourselves about each other. And that's what drives me to do what I do. Because I think that if we were all engaged in first understanding who we are, what our story is, and being confident in that after we've interrogated all the deep and meaningful aspects of our identity, that when we engage somebody else to learn their story, to learn their identity, it's not so threatening. It's an opportunity to actually learn. Because I think that is where the potential for creating a cultural revolution is. If we have a movement of people within the Jewish people and our allies that are ideologically committed to dialogue instead of debate, that could change the game. What's the difference between dialogue and debate? Debate is where I'm listening to somebody in order to respond to them. Dialogue is when I'm listening to somebody in order to actually understand them. And then I might have something that I can teach them too. So there's a lot we can talk about. I really want to hear what you want to talk about. So let's just shift right now into the Q&A.
Hi. So that was fantastic. Thank you. Everyone, hand?
That quickly,
Yes.
the fact that the young guy was pushed back or pushed through the crowd and said, "Are you a follower? You're telling me you're a follower." It means that the indoctrination was there on his side, that they teach the negative, they don't teach the cohesive positive.
Absolutely. And I could say, one of the things that is incredible tragedy of this conflict is that we have assumptions that the other side has been exposed to facts that challenge their narrative. And what I found again and again, it's just so not true. On TikTok, something like 60% of my followers are Palestinians. And one of the most consistent responses I get from them is, wow, this is the first time I've ever been exposed to this. Never heard any information that contradicts the orthodox narrative that I've heard about who the Jewish people are.
Wow.
So there's going to be opportunity for everyone to ask questions, but I'm going to ask a few to begin with, because I think most people in this room may have experienced some of it. So when you're on social media, and you are huge on social media, and you're hearing about, Israel committing genocide, apartheid, people who support Israel being baby killers, how do you respond to that?
Well, the first thing the first way that I respond is, okay, what do you mean by that? Because often the discourse on social media begins and ends with buzzwords. And usually it's just to create an effect. Most of the time when people are using certain terminology, it's just because they know that it will create a lot of noise and it'll create kind of shock and awe. And then they just leave it at that. It's not even because they're usually invested in actually making the argument about that terminology. So the first thing I asked them is, what do you mean by that, right? How do you understand that term? When you're using that word, what does it mean to you? Because we can get in these debates about terminologies. What I'm more interested about is talking about what's actually bothering you, right? What are you concerned about? Because it could be that in many cases I'm concerned about some of the same things, right? I'm just not interested in slapping a buzzword on it and then ending the conversation right there. So, okay, use the term genocide. Okay, are you concerned about the large scale death of Palestinians in Gaza? Me too. Let's talk about that. Let's unpack that, right? Yeah, let's understand this, right? And are there going to be things where we might even agree? Like, yeah, maybe I don't think that bombing right here was correct, right? That was probably, from what I understand, a bad strategic move, an amoral move. But are we going to talk also about the fact that Hamas is right now is giving out stipends to thousands of widows, right? So how many of those people were included in the number of casualties that you were just seeing on, on X and assuming that means women and children, right? Unpacking it. Apartheid. Okay, you use the term apartheid. Are you concerned about the fact? Does it bother you that there is different political systems governing different people in Judea and Samaria and the West Bank? Me too. Let's understand that, right? How is apartheid as a term? How is that incorrect in this context? And what are the actual problems there that we need to solve? That's how I respond to it.
What about when they say, well, you have to be wrong because the UN says so? And so does Doctors Without Borders, right? And Amnesty. So are you telling me all of these are lying?
My response to that is, if the international community in all of its various forms, like the United Nations and Amnesty International, if they were ineffective and basically silent when Tutsis were being mass slaughtered in Rwanda, then I don't think they really have, they have nothing to say to us, right? Like I really do see these international organizations that feel only comfortable to prosecute African leaders and Israelis while they're completely silent about all of the war criminals in the rest of the world. I see it as a morally corrupt institution. And it's a discussion we can have, because I think that many of these same people would actually agree about that if we shifted the context to, the conversation to something else.
And being in the military yourself, did you get a feeling that soldiers just want to go in and kill people?
It's a tough question, actually. I mean, look, war is incredibly ugly. And the West, thank God, hasn't experienced war really, and on a mass national scale since Vietnam. And part of the ugliness of war is that it creates angry and hateful people. And so are there angry and hateful people in the IDF? Yes, absolutely. Part of my responsibility when I was a squad commander is to make sure that those people don't do things that are illegal, right? Because every soldier in the IDF is educated in the laws of ethics in what we call Torah Neshek, purity of arms. And then you go out into the field and then you're tested. And are there soldiers that fail that test? Yes, absolutely. And are there soldiers that stand up every single day and they pass that test with flying colors? Absolutely. I think it's important for us to understand what the ideal is, because ideals are important, versus the complicated reality. And that's going to make some people uncomfortable. But I think it's the most challenging thing for us to do, for a society that doesn't know what it's like to really have your existence challenged and threatened.
Is any
Longer conversation, but a short.
well, yeah. And most of the time on social media, they don't want to have those long conversations. I mean, that's the sad reality from what I've experienced. I don't know about you, but
Let me just add one thing to it, right? The core of anti-Semitism is the dehumanization of the Jew, right? Fear of the Jew, because the idea is that the Jew is somehow superhuman, all controlling of the whole world, subhuman, right? Controlled by horrible urges and therefore involved in some of the most disgusting crimes on the planet. And to then look at any Jewish flaw or any flaw in any Jewish person or community or country and then turn that into the reason to demonize it, that is the core of anti-Semitism. And so our response to that, of somebody saying that we are all evil, is not to say we are all perfect, we're angels. We're not. It's to show that we're human. And human beings, societies, countries are complicated, right? They're not always going to do things that are okay. Sometimes they're going to do things that are terrible. And our ability to hold that together, that's our humanity. And so we cannot sacrifice that as we fight, as we struggle not to be dehumanized.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? Go ahead.
Hi. I had a question about Arabic. You know, the vast majority of Arab citizens of Israel speak Hebrew, and the vast majority of Israelis today, at least, don't speak Arabic. Or Israeli Jews, sorry, don't speak Arabic. You cross that boundary by meeting people where they're at, using their native language, and I think, at least in my experience as well, it opens people's hearts, right? So, what would you suggest as far as like Arabic language education for Israeli Jews to really cross that barrier and build bridges between the two communities?
It's a great question. And the way you characterize the reality in Israel is very accurate. I would say that a lot of people have asked me, why do you believe that all Israeli schools should be integrated, essentially, Jews and Arabs together? And I actually don't believe that. I think Israel is a very tribalistic society, right? People like the Datim Leumim, the national religious, like to have their schools. The Chilonim, the secular Israelis, like to have their schools. The Arab Israelis like to have their schools. It's natural for people to want to have their culture, their values, their language be the dominant in that situation. Should there be ways in which we diversify the curricula in those schools? Absolutely. But I don't think the answer is just to just push everybody together and just give one curriculum to everybody, because Israel is a uniquely Middle Eastern society in that way, unlike America, and that's okay. My dream, though, is that there should be like mandatory, we call them kitanot, like after school programs or summer programs where you have to be engaged in activities, mutual learning with another community. And I think the most fundamental community bridge that needs to be built is going to be between Israeli Jews and Arab citizens of Israel. And I do think that a bilingual society is going to be good for everybody, because Hebrew is our language. It's my language. I love it, right? I dream in Hebrew, and you know, if I could write poetry, I would write poetry in Hebrew. But Arabic is the language of the region, and it's going to remain that way. And we need to be engaged with the region, right? We don't want to be as some leaders of Israel have said in the past, a quote unquote villa in the jungle. No, we are part of the region. And Arabic is the tool for us to actually be that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for coming out. You have quite the presence on social media. It's pretty impressive. So the one thing I was kind of surprised about in the broader Arabic and Islamic world is how the UAE, for example, and Saudi Arabia and the other kind of allies who we're very friendly with, right? We've got great relationships. And with the Abraham Accords, you know, there was Israelis there, and there are kosher shops and restaurants and so on there. And the moment that the authorities see a Palestinian flag go up, they're immediately arrested. They have no tolerance for the intolerance of this Palestinian mentality that starts from birth, that kill the Jew, kill the Jew, kill the Jew. It doesn't matter what bridge you build, they're going to burn it, and then they're going to kill you, and they're going to love it, which is worse than the Nazis. My question is, why are we entertaining any dialogue with Nazis? Why don't we behave like the UAE and Saudi Arabia and just ban any mention of any of this until they get their shit in order, and until then, they can go kind of F themselves?
So I'll start with the parallel that you drew between Palestinians and Nazis. I don't think I'll be the first person to say, like somebody that has had, you know, confronted, I'll use that term for the multiple meanings that it can express, Hamas members multiple times in my life. I'll be the last person to try and sugarcoat the reality of that evil, right? The evil of that ideology, the evil of what that they're willing to perpetrate, and joyfully so, as you put it.
Not just Hamas.
No, I'm getting it. And
Civilians.
yeah, I'm getting it. And I've also had, in addition to those interactions, thousands and thousands of interactions, relationships with Palestinians across the religious and communal and socioeconomic spectrum of different places throughout the land.
Who would get killed by Hamas by just entertaining building any bridges with you.
Okay, again, I've been in situations I'll just give you a few. This could be a very long back and forth. Like I understand that,
Yeah.
but just let me explain kind of how I see this. The Palestinian society has a lot of big problems in terms of deeply, inherited generation anti-Semitism, right? It's something that exists in the school systems, it's something that exists in the media, and it's something that exists in the theology, the popular theology. Nobody is denying that, and that needs to be contended with. What I'm saying is that one of the ways to contend with it, not with the Hamas, because again, there's a spectrum, right? There's the people that are radical and willing to pick up a gun and go commit horrible atrocities. There's people that are kind of more like, they would say those things, but they would never act on it. And there's people that are like, no, I actually disagree with that, but I won't do anything. And then there's the people on the complete other side of the spectrum, like, no, I'm against that, and I will fight against them, right? And building bridges with all of those other people, right, is the way that I believe that can take, I'm not going to say fringe, right, because they're a significant number. That's the way that you can defeat, in my mind, right? I'm not saying that we give up on our ability to defend ourselves, our ability to be forceful and strong, but you can do two things at the same time. And I think that's part of the problem.
Kibbutz killed.
What's that?
It's the mentality they got the whole kibbutz killed that wanted to pacify and wanted to build bridges.
So, but I'm not
They all
arguing to
got
pacify. What I'm saying is that, for example, when I engage with Palestinian counterparts, from various different places, there is a understanding that I'm not going there to pacify them, right? I'm there as a proud, strong son of the nation of Israel. And if you try and hurt me or my family, that's not going to end well for you. And with that understanding, let's have a conversation. Let's engage with each other. Let's listen to each other, right? There's this understanding. I get one of the things that we heard a lot after October 7th is within Israeli society is let's speak Arabic, right? The way that was used in the media was let's use force, right? Let's do, as you said, like in the UAE, and just smash them to pieces.
No.
But, no. I'm saying
Not
that's
kill them.
I'm not saying
Not
that's what
kill
you
them.
said. That's not what you said. But that's the way that a lot of people I've heard in Israeli society have expressed it. My approach to that is that speaking Arabic is, yes, it's being strong. It's having the ability to be like, hey, if you mess around, you're going to severely regret it. But it's also, with the other hand, being hospitable, right? Hospitality. It's being able to show love and strength at the same time. I don't see the ideology of the kibbutzim, and I have a lot of love and identify with them in a lot of things. But I don't see that approach to peacemaking being what I'm talking about here. This is something different. This is the type of relationships that we see developing between Palestinians and Jews all over Judea and Samaria, right? People that work together, people that live together, that let their kids play together. And there is an understanding of mutual respect, real respect that comes from the understanding that I see you as a human being, you see me as a human being, but we also understand that there is a clear boundary that doesn't get crossed.
I think you're creating a moral equivalence that's very dangerous.
Can you elaborate?
I think you're kind of equating that there's some moral equivalence between us and the Palestinians, and there is not. You go and look at the Palestinian government, and you go on Wikipedia, and there's 20 different political groups. They're all on the spectrum of diabolical to Nazi barbaric hell. There's no democracy, there's no communists even, there's no socialists, there's no people that you want to even have a dialogue with. And until then, there's zero. You treat them like Egypt treats them, like UAE treats them, and like Saudi Arabia treats them. You do not entertain, and you don't put fuel on the fire until they change their entire structure. So
I think that the answer to what you're saying is in part of what you said, which is that there's no democracy, right?
Zero.
If it's a non-democratic society, I agree. I don't see symmetry here. I don't think that's what I'm describing here, some type of symmetry, either moral or any other terms, right? There's power asymmetry. There's also moral asymmetry. So there's multiple levels of asymmetry here. It's not just one direction.
On every level.
And then the fact that there's no democracy in that society, you cannot then expect to then see a level of political organization that violates some of the principles of those that are willing to use force in order to make sure that those entities within that society don't thrive. And again, I'm saying this not as somebody that's theorizing. right? I had am connected to people throughout Judea and Samaria, in Gaza, throughout Arab society in Israel that are democratic, that are liberal, that even those that are not liberal democratic or deeply traditional conservative, but see the Jewish people and our presence as a positive thing and want to ally themselves with us, right? I know thousands of people like that. Now, your natural question is, okay, where are they? Where is the political representation of them? And to that I say, yes, you're right. At some point, it's on those communities and those leaders to actually get themselves and to create something. But let me just say one little anecdote here, and then we have to stop this because otherwise you and I can go all night. And I love it. It's great. I'm glad because, by the way, this right here is a big part of the dialogue in Israel right now. This is about, okay, how do we learn from the mistakes that led to October 7th? And how do we actually move forward in the future? It's a big part of this conversation right here. And I'll just leave one anecdote. In Hebron, there are multiple clans that take very different positions about what the relationship is to the Palestinian Authority, to Hamas, to the Jewish people, to Israel. One of the most prominent clans, one of the biggest clans in Hebron, is the Jabari clan. The Jabari clan, for decades now, has said, we are connecting ourselves to the Jewish people. They're very pious Muslims. They're unapologetically Palestinian, but they are like, we are against Hamas. We are against the Palestinian Authority's corruption. We are connecting ourselves with the Jewish community there. And for years, there has been a relationship of respect between the Jewish community in Hebron and that Palestinian community of the Jabaris. There was a move for them to gain more power, to them to actually have political representation in leading all of Hebron. And when that happened, when they started to make that move for power, the Palestinian Authority arrested the head of the clan and started torturing him. There was an assumption that when that would happen, that Israel would go and use its veto power on the PA, which it has, and go take out Ashraf Jabari. And they didn't. So this is also about us understanding how to truly act like the UAE. It's not just, okay, this is a symbol that we see as an enemy, let's destroy it. It's also about engaging with the community in its social reality, right? It's knowing Islam, it's knowing Arab culture, it's engaging with people and trying to find solutions within the cultural context of the Middle East. And so, yes, I'm not saying that means that we're just as much to blame for this as they are. You're not going to find me making that argument. What I'm saying is that we are the people that say that we are the Mamlechet Kohanim. We are supposed to be the kingdom of priests. We're supposed to be the Ola Goyim, the light into the nations. We say to ourselves that the onus is on us to find solutions in impossible situations. This is an impossible situation. We are dealing with an entire empire, right, that sees itself as deeply ashamed of the fact that there is a Jewish bubble in that Islamist sea. We have to confront that. We have to figure out a way to make our light shine onto other people. I think the UAE is an important piece of it, but it's also not going to be us becoming the UAE, right? Our mission isn't to be the UAE. The UAE is a beautiful place, and it's got a lot of amazing things. I went there and I've had meetings with the sheikhs there to discuss about these things, by the way. Our conversations was the sheikhs trying to figure out how they can manage their relations with Palestinians better. At the end of the day, the UAE is also a place where there's no freedom of speech, right? It's a place where you feel very stifled in many different ways. So, yeah, give and take, right? We want to also have our freedom and our liberal values as well, right? So, anyways, out there.
Hang on, thanks, Alex. No, for another question over here.
Okay.
Sorry, we're like Muslims. Alan, sorry, we really got to cut.
Right
That's
there.
a great question. Let's speak about it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I've had discussions with people. Is there a speaker? Oh, never mind.
The speaker,
Got it. I was just recording. Got it. Thank you. I'll use my broadcast voice to reach everybody. So a lot of people, when they think about Israel, they make it's not my viewpoint, that they make an argument that says this is a value system thing, the genocide, the apartheid, all the arguments against what Israel is doing in Gaza and anywhere else in Israel, and it's a value system argument. Where do they get that? Media. They look at the media and they see CNN or any of the popular national networks showing the visuals. If it bleeds, it leads is a common journalism phrase. They're showing
the poor Palestinians when they're attacked by the bad Israelis. Okay, question, as a journalist and as a marketer, and actually, and with a social media marketer here too, what can we all do, either as professionals or citizens or whatever, to influence the media so that the absolutist message that people think that they're getting, it's obviously Israel is wrong. How could Israel possibly be right? How can we influence that media to present a more a more balanced viewpoint?
So
Incidentally, I will not put on a MAGA hat, but I'll tell you this.
Okay, so we are a nonpartisan organization, and I'd appreciate it if we don't screen things like that out. This is a human topic. This isn't a political topic. Did you want to?
So
give Yirmiyahu a chance to.
Yeah, I was going to ask him if he wants to answer.
I think it's an incredibly important question because ideas are communicated through social media now, right? Not through old media. The vast majority of people, that's where they're getting their information. That's where they're getting their news. That's where they're getting their worldviews, right? They're getting educated through these mediums. And I think that we've gotten in a habit of looking for some type of silver bullet. But I can tell you as somebody that attended the BDS National Conference 10 years ago, in order to understand how they're seeing things, how are they operating? How are they building this massive coalition of people? They were planning not for silver bullet. They were planning not for some new trend in order to change the conversation overnight. They were building a revolution. They were talking about what is America going to look like 10 years down the line? And that's how we need to be thinking about this. When it comes to social media and messaging, it goes back to the question about how do you respond to dehumanization, right? The core of anti-Semitism, of fear and hatred of the Jew, is the dehumanization of the Jew. Then the response to that can't be the Ubermensch Jew, right? We're perfect, we're spotless, we do everything right, we're the most moral in the world, the most amazing in the world, right? Even in some places where that might be the case, right? That's not the antidote to dehumanization. That just creates an inversion of it, which just makes the scary all-powerful Jew, which we're seeing play out in many pathological ways, particularly in American politics today. And the answer, I believe, is to challenge these convenient, simplistic narratives with complexity, right? With the type of information which causes people to go, okay, that I didn't know. That makes me question this a little bit, right?
Peacefully.
It starts a new conversation. I'll give you an example. This is connected obviously to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in a way, but it's within Israeli politics. There's a lot of discussion about the relations between the government of Israel and the Bedouin communities in the south. And a huge part of that story is about the government increasing demolitions of villages that are not recognized, right? Why they're not recognized, that's a whole story. We can do a whole hour lecture just on that. It's a fascinating, important part of the history of the state of Israel. But I'm bringing it up because within the system, right, one of the things that I realized while I was making a film about the community, about the Bedouin community, is you have the complicated relationship with the state of Israel, which all the people within the worldview you're talking about, they'll put the camera on that, right? And they'll show that. Wow, look at this, the big bad Jew using his power, using the Western style nation state to bully the Bedouin, right? That fits that narrative. And by the way, there's seeds of truth in that, right? Everything has a seed of truth, right? And they just focus on that. But there's another thing that I noticed while I was there. And that's that within the Bedouin society, way before the establishment of the state of Israel, there was another hierarchy. There's also another system of oppression that exists. And that is one which puts Afro-Bedouins, descendants of people that were enslaved by the elites of Bedouin society throughout the entire region, by the way, a mass enslavement of tens of millions of people, that today are putting them in a specific neighborhood where all the sewage of the city is being dumped on them. That exists in Bedouin cities in the south of Israel, and that exists in Gaza in the Al-Abid neighborhood, the slave neighborhood there. Now, does that change everything? No, but it complicates the narrative of there just being one imperial reality to contend with. And I think that the more we're focused on just telling our stories with that type of complexity, and then building relationships with other communities that have mutual interest to tell those stories too, that's how we change the game. right? And so there's a whole longer part, like how do we do that? Because they were doing that. They were savvy in media, they were savvy in the academic spaces, and they were savvy in coalition building with people in the activist space. We need to be thinking about how we can do that right now for 10 years later.
Hey, we have 2 more questions over here. I will get to you in a moment. I was just going over here. So
Well, I have a couple things to say. So, one, some of the stuff is not new. When you're talking about these dialogues, back in 2012, winter semester, my daughter was in grad school and did her semester here, and they had a joint class with the grad students from JTS and grad students from Arabic, Palestinian, whatever, and they went together and they talked. Didn't change anything. You know, Yom HaRushalayim. They were all doing things and the others were just doing their hate flags. It doesn't change. I'm a child of survivors, but there's ingrained things, and I don't know that anything is going to change. But I also think that sometimes Israel keeps its mouth shut, because I have nephews that were in Gaza, and one of the things that never got out into the media was, you know, they speculate about the UN, but that UNRWA, that is a branch of Hamas or any of the others, because my nephew was there and found bags outside of tunnels marked with flour, just flour for cooking. When the IDF tested it, it was concrete. Where does that get out there? You can't defend yourself without giving proof. But I'm not done. I mean, equal time here, from New Jersey.
right.
The other thing, what?
It's a small state.
Yeah, I'm getting there. Small state with big mouths. Okay.
Thank you.
So the one thing you didn't really touch on is the Holocaust deniers. And how do you deal with that? Because
So I didn't touch on a lot of things because then we
Okay.
This is a you know, we're talking about hundreds of
Thank you.
years, not
Yeah.
just 100 years, hundreds of years
Yeah.
of history here, of you know, volumes and volumes of theology, of you know, of the history of the negotiations, of combat. There's a lot we didn't talk about. And absolutely, one of the reason why I use one of that anecdote of the person, the Palestinian 16-year-old being like, whoa, they see themselves as followers of Moses, is that's like one tiny piece of a whole architecture of narrative about who the Jewish people are. Because if that doesn't make sense, then all of a sudden maybe the things that I heard about this Holocaust, this mahraka, being exaggerated, being their fault, not happening at all, maybe that also is not 100% correct. And it starts a process, hopefully, of change. Because again, what we're talking about here is not like a sure thing. Like I said, there's no silver bullets here, right? Some people who want silver bullets is just like literally bullets, right? We're just the answers that people are coming up. Okay, that's it. We're in this horrible cycle of violence. We're in this horrible situation. Let's just shoot or expel or that. And what I'm saying is, first of all, we cannot be naive in terms of the neighborhood that we live in. What I'm not saying is that we stop learning how to fight, that we stop learning how to be strong, that we start to be those that try to pacify. I'm not saying that at all, right? We need to be strong. We need to be proud, and we need to be certain of who we are and what we're doing in that land in order to survive there.
Of engage.
And strength in that region means knowing how to, with one hand, have a fist or have a sword or a gun or whatever it is. With the other hand, it's usually the opposite, should be the stronger hand, is the one that brings people in, right? Deen, judgment, and chesed, rachamim, kindness and mercy. That's what I'm talking about. And not all dialogues are created equal. Let me just say that, right? Some dialogues don't end up being dialogues. Like I said, people end up talking past each other. It's really challenging, and I say this because I've done it many times. A big part of what I did before I started putting stuff on social media was I would get into a room and I would have a group of people with some of the most extreme ideas from within Israeli Jewish society, with some of the most extreme ideas within Palestinian society. And I would try to get them to actually engage with each other in a way that they're actually learning from each other. It's extremely, extremely difficult, but it is possible because I've seen it work. There are people, and I've tested it, right? This isn't theory, that I know right now in areas that are controlled by Hamas, they would die for me. It's been tested. People have actually put themselves on the line in order to protect me, a Jewish Israeli that's very proud about my identity as a Jewish Israeli. So it's possible, right? And if it's possible, then my belief as a believing Jew, that means the Jewish people are capable of doing it.
All right, we've got one question over here and then one last question over here in the back.
Oh, John. I don't really have questions. I have comments. We traveled all over Eastern Africa last year and Western Africa the year before. And I'm feeling that we're fighting more, not so much the Gaza war, which is a physical war, but a philosophical war and a propaganda war. And we're not doing a good job. We're really failing on that job. And it hurts me when Jewish people say that we're committing genocide and things like that. It really hurts me as a Jew because I feel that Judaism does not believe in that and does not condone that. But we have to do more about this propaganda. And also, we have Holocaust museums popping up all over the world, everywhere. Why don't we have more about the accomplishments of Jews, the accomplishments of Israel, and the good things about Judaism? People don't even know what Judaism is. People that are Christian whose God was a faithful Jew. And I think we need to do a lot more about that, counteracting that trend.
Thank you. I agree entirely. And I would just add to it that I think that one of the issues that we have philosophically in the Jewish world is that because of the incredible trauma of the Holocaust, that we've gotten too much in the habit of remembering tragedy and specific tragedy, right? By the way, it's like how many museums are there about the 1 million Jews that were expelled from Arab and Islamic countries, right? Outside of Israel, basically none. And that's a problem too. But beyond that, it's also about us not just being a people of survival. We're a people of purpose, right? We're a people, there's a reason why that the overarching narrative of the Torah is of exile and return, exile and return. Why exile and return? Why aren't we just an organic people coming out of a land and just staying in that land? Because when you leave and come back, you go back with purpose. And the purpose isn't just to create an amazing mamad. It's not just to make an amazing, how do you say mamad in English? Bomb shelter, right? It's not just a place to survive. Of course, we need to survive. But we need to survive with purpose. And what is the message that the children of Israel are coming to bring humanity right now? That's where I think we start to win the philosophical fight. Because humanity is in flux right now. Humanity is struggling, is in crisis struggle between Islam and Christendom, between liberalism and post-liberalism, right? With nation states, post-nation states. All of humanity is questioning everything right now. And so this is a unique opportunity for us to say, hey, we, the children of Israel, return to our land, return to Zion. We have answers. We have created a society which is a beautiful mix of East and West, which is deeply liberal in terms of the way that we love personal freedom, but also deeply traditional in the way that we're collectivists and we construct our families. Yes, we have a lot of problems, and correcting those problems is going to be a part of how we actually show the world, how we can create this model for the rest of humanity. But I think that the key for us changing the philosophical discussion is for us to actually, for the first time in a long time, offer a uniquely Jewish idea out of Zion.
Okay, we have 2 more questions. We're going to keep it really short, right, y'all?
Hi.
Sorry, I was over here. So the
Yes, come to us. So first of all, I wanted to tell you that I've been following you since the war, and you are my sunshine in the Instagram because most of the videos are really like hate on both communities and like a lot of things which are like kind of depressing. And I really love the fact that you're trying to build a bridge between the communities. And I was always wondering when I see your videos and all the comments and everything, I was wondering, so it's more personal question, how do you find the strength to do it every day? Because it's not easy. You get a lot of like also comments of people who are like against what you're doing or who are posting also like different racist stuff or whatever. So I was thinking like, how do you do that every day?
a lot of prayer, specifically 3 times a day. But that's really the answer. Like it's tough. It really is tough. You know, it's a lot of hatred, but I'm incredibly inspired. I get hundreds and hundreds of messages and people walking up to the street every day, Israelis and Palestinians, Jews and Arabs, Muslims and Christians, Muslims and Jews, walking up to me and telling me that your content changed the way I see this entire thing. And if it's like so many people every single day, that's not nothing, right? There's something there. Everybody says things are impossible until all of a sudden they happen. And then everybody retroactively looks back at it, and then historians will debate, oh, we should have seen it coming because of this, and this was happening, and they describe it as a new ism, and they describe it as sometimes it just takes a few people to just change everything. And then we all say, okay, of course it was going to happen. So when I see that interaction, that's what gives me hope for the future. That's what gives me a belief that this type of work, if we're able to do it on a collective level, can really create a revolution of the way that we relate to each other and the way that we relate to this conflict and the way that we envision the purpose of the Jewish people and the nation of Israel for this generation and for the future. And prayer keeps me aligned with that purpose.
Amen.
Good evening. One comment and one question. The comment is that all the Palestinians you're talking to, and they become very understanding, they become like a Tajay with a target on their back, unfortunately, because the other Arabs, Palestinians around them won't necessarily tolerate their enlightenment. But you left out talking about the Druze, who are probably the most unique people in that neck of the woods, who are Islamic. They're unique, but they're very loyal to Israel. And what surprised me last week, I read an article that Israel is sending Hazala ambulances and medical personnel, Jews trained people, into Syria to the Jewish community there to give them medical assistance. I think that's truly remarkable.
Yeah, it is. And you get a whole conversation about Jews. Actually, I made a film about the Jews. It's on YouTube. You can look up the Druze community in Israel and my name, and you'll see a film that I made. It's about 30 minutes. And it's about how the Druze went from being a community that slaughtered us. A lot of people don't know this. In 1834, the Druze community in the north of Israel did a pogrom against the Jews. And it wasn't the first time. It was the second time in that period that the Druze did a mass slaughter of Jewish people. It personally affected my family because we were in Sfat during that period, and that's why we went to Jerusalem. If you look in Druze sacred texts, there's a lot of deeply, deeply problematic things about Jewish people written there. And yet that community went from being that community with the deeply problematic things that they believed and said about Jews and willing to murder Jews, to becoming the entire community seeing themselves as being obviously deeply connected to the Jews. Jethro and Moses. It's natural. But that was the product of unique relationships that were developed between the leaders, the manhigim of the Yishuv in the north, that they developed with the Druze. And they were able, through that process, and it was really difficult, to create what we call the Brit Damim, the blood covenant between the Druze community and the Jewish community. And we've seen how that covenant actually withstood the test when Jews are being massacred in Syria.
Okay, so can we do one more quick one? Is everyone okay with that? All right, here we go.
Sorry, I'll try to keep this quick. I just want to apologize for being late. I was actually at the chemistry exam, which is kind of related to my question. Yeah. Yeah, so I'm a student at Emory right now, and I'm just in a writing class. One of my professors, it's just about psychology, but she, of course, has tied in Israel-Palestine conflict into it. Yeah. And I guess I'm just more wondering, like, what's the time and place to debate? Because, like, in the classroom, it was kind of like a quickly mentioned, caught me off guard, and I kind of let it slide, although I immediately saw her view. She was quick to use the words like genocide. But then later in the class, I saw that we're reading a Zine that's like talking about the encampments in Colombia. So I guess, yeah, my question is like, what's the time and place for debating this kind of thing? Because I also asked her after class if she would want to talk about it one on one, and she pretty much declined. Yeah.
I'll give you a personal story.
Repeat the question.
Oh, so he's a student at Emory, and in psychology class, his professor has decided that it makes sense to involve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in their curricula, and so she decided reading about it, and she used the word genocide nonchalantly and continued. And so the question is, what's the right time to debate? That's what you said, right? So I'll just tell you a personal story. When I was a freshman studying international relations in the university in Oregon, my professor made it assigned reading for us to engage with the idea of why Iran needs a nuclear weapon. And the reading was essentially that Israel is this hegemonic power, and the only way to stop this tide of conquest is for Iran to save the day and get nuclear power. And when that happened, what I did is, of course, I read it, and then I read what she didn't assign, which was all the articles that are written that contradict all that information. And then I went to class that next day, and I shut down the class, basically. Like I immediately was like the first person with my hand up, engaging with her on what she assigned, challenging it. The class didn't move. Like, she had a lot of things planned for that day, and it didn't happen. Whether or not that was the right thing to do, I don't know. After she said, I'd rather you engaged me privately about it. So this is really, it's going to depend on the person. If you went to her, and I think you did the right thing, I was a lot more aggressive back then. I think you did the right thing by going up to her and asking to engage with her one-on-one. If she rejected it, then what I would do is I would shut down the class. I would certainly make my dissent very clear in that space. It's a very tough thing to do. But I can tell you one thing about when I did that, when I shut down the class. After the class, a lot of other students were giving me dirty looks, 100%. But one guy walked up to me, and he pulled out of his shirt his Magen David, and he said, I'm Jewish too, by the way. What I found out later is that he was from a family of former Soviet Union Jews that told him every single day, don't ever tell anybody you're Jewish. He didn't even know Hanukkah was. For American Jews, that means you really don't know a lot. Right? And from that moment, he started a whole process of being reconnecting with his Judaism, connecting to Israel. He ended up marrying a Jewish girl and building a Jewish family. And it started at that moment right there. So it can be incredibly intimidating. But I think that in the long run, when Jews are proud and we know who we are and what we have purpose, and we're not afraid to challenge problematic ideas, both by our enemies and within our community, I think that the potential for transformation there is unlimited.
And if you need any support, you just let us know.
Shameless plug.
Just trying to help. So thank you so much. And thank you again for everyone coming.
Thank you, everybody.
We are going to be very honored right now if Cantor Harry Block, he will come up and sing both anthems before we leave.
I'll just stand right here. I'm not.
If you're able, please rise, and I'd love to, I don't really need this, but I'd love to make a circle for everybody to be close. I'm not here to sing at you, I'm here to sing with you. Kol od balevav anima nefesh Yehudi homiya Ulfate Mizrach Kadima, Ein Letzion Sophia. Od lo avda tikvatenu, hatikva bat shnot alpayim, liotam chofshi be'atzenu, Eretz Zion Yerushalayim. Liotam chofshi be'atzenu, Shalom. Chaim.